Have you ever noticed how certain women seem to possess an almost supernatural magnetism, even when they're completely alone? Not the women desperately seeking attention or validation, not the ones posting cryptic messages hoping someone will ask what's wrong. I'm talking about the women who've stopped looking entirely, the ones who seem perfectly content in their own company, the ones who say no without explanation and mean it. Here's what's fascinating and what most people completely miss about this phenomenon. The answer isn't confidence tricks or playing hard to get. It's not reverse psychology or manipulation tactics. It's something far more profound that evolutionary psychologist David Buss discovered after studying mating behaviors across 37 different cultures. What he found challenges everything we've been taught about attraction, relationships, and feminine power. And the seventh trait I'm going to reveal, it's something so primal, so deeply embedded in our evolutionary programming, that most men can't even consciously identify why they're drawn to it. But here's where it gets really interesting. These women aren't trying to attract anyone at all. So what makes them absolutely irresistible? Let's dive deep into the evolutionary psychology behind this paradox. For decades, we've been fed a story about what makes women attractive. Be agreeable, be available, be grateful for attention. Make yourself smaller so others feel bigger. The pleasing epidemic that Esther Perel talks about has disconnected us from something our ancestors understood intuitively. But let me paint you a different picture. She's not broken. She's in metamorphosis. She's not cold. She's selectively warm. She's not afraid of love. She's protective of her energy. She's not bitter from past relationships. She's distilled into pure essence. Every no she gives is a yes to herself. Every boundary she sets is a declaration of her worth. Every moment she chooses solitude over settling is an act of evolutionary wisdom. And here's what nobody talks about. This behavior triggers something ancient in the human brain, something that David Buss spent 3 decades researching, something that Helen Fisher mapped in neurological studies, something that goes back to the very foundations of how our species survived and thrived. You see, throughout human evolution, the women who were choosy, who had standards, who couldn't be easily won, these were the women who passed on the strongest genetic material. They were the ones whose children survived. They were the ones who shaped the future of our species. But somewhere along the way, we lost this truth. We started believing that desperation was feminine, that neediness was attractive, that our value came from how much we could give rather than what we chose to receive. The women I'm talking about have remembered something profound. They've tapped back into an ancient feminine archetype, the self-contained goddess, the woman who is complete unto herself. And this completeness, this inner sovereignty, it creates a magnetic field that operates on frequencies most people can't even perceive. It's not about being unavailable. It's about being unneedful. It's not about being cold. It's about being discerning. It's not about rejecting love. It's about magnetizing the right kind of love. But here's where the evolutionary psychology gets really fascinating. When a woman stops needing external validation, when she becomes emotionally self-sufficient, when she creates a life so full and meaningful that a relationship would be an addition rather than a necessity, something extraordinary happens in the dynamic of attraction. The ancient hunter-gatherer programming in the male brain recognizes something it hasn't seen in modern times. A woman of high mate value, a woman who chooses rather than accepts, a woman who embodies what researchers call sexual selectivity at its highest level. In this recognition, it's not conscious, it's primal, it's evolutionary, it's magnetic. Arthur Aaron's research shows us that we're most attracted to people who are passionate about their own lives, not passionate about us, passionate about themselves, about their purpose, about their growth, about their becoming. This brings us to the first two traits that create this irresistible magnetism. David Buss's groundbreaking research revealed something that turns conventional dating advice on its head. After studying over 10,000 individuals across cultures spanning 6 continents, he discovered that the most powerful predictor of long-term attraction isn't availability, it's selectivity. But not just any kind of selectivity. Evolutionary selectivity. The kind that signals high reproductive value, strong genetics, and survival intelligence all wrapped into one irresistible package. Helen Fisher's brain imaging studies show us exactly what happens neurologically when we encounter someone who doesn't need us. The dopamine pathways that create desire, they don't activate from certainty. They activate from mystery, from the unknown, from the challenge of winning someone who might not be won. This is why the woman who needs nothing becomes everything. Sue Johnson's attachment research adds another layer. She found that the most securely attached individuals, the ones who create the strongest, most lasting bonds, are those who enter relationships from a place of wholeness rather than brokenness, from abundance rather than scarcity, from choice rather than need. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Buss identified what he calls mate value. It's an unconscious calculation our brains make about someone's genetic fitness, emotional stability, and survival capabilities. And the women who score highest on this invisible scale, they're the ones who demonstrate complete self-sufficiency while remaining open to partnership. Think about this from an evolutionary perspective. For millions of years, the women who survived were those who could thrive independently when necessary, but also form strong pair bonds when beneficial. They were the women who chose their mates carefully, who had standards, who wouldn't settle for genetic material that didn't meet their requirements. Modern dating culture tells us this makes us too picky or unrealistic. Evolutionary psychology tells us this makes us highly intelligent and biologically successful. Esther Perel calls this the paradox of desire. We want what we cannot have, and we devalue what comes too easily. The woman who is perfectly content alone becomes infinitely more intriguing than the woman who needs someone to complete her. This isn't game playing. This isn't strategy. This is the natural result of a woman who has done the inner work to become genuinely whole. And when a woman embodies this wholeness, when she radiates the energy of someone who is complete rather than seeking completion, she activates something in others that goes beyond conscious attraction. She activates evolutionary recognition, the recognition of a high-value mate, someone worth pursuing, someone worth earning, someone whose genetics and emotional stability would contribute to strong offspring and stable partnerships. But this recognition isn't about having children or even wanting a relationship. It's about embodying the qualities that our species has been programmed to find irresistible for millions of years. And this brings us to the 7 specific traits that create this magnetic effect. Trait 1. Complete emotional self-regulation. She doesn't cry to get comfort. She doesn't create drama to get attention. She doesn't break down to get rescue. When life hits her hard, and it does, she processes it privately first. She feels everything deeply, but she handles her emotions like the sovereign queen of her inner kingdom. This isn't suppression, this is mastery. And there's something incredibly magnetic about a woman who can hold space for her own pain without immediately needing someone else to fix it. David Buss found that emotional stability is one of the highest markers of mate value across all cultures. Not because stable people are boring, but because they signal genetic fitness and survival capability. Trait 2. Sacred selectivity. She doesn't say yes to every invitation. She doesn't accept every advance. She doesn't lower her standards because she's lonely or because time is passing. Her no is complete. No explanation, no justification, no apology. This selectivity isn't snobbery, it's wisdom. It's the recognition that her energy is precious, her time is valuable, and her presence is a gift to be earned, not a given to be assumed. And here's what creates the magnetic pull: that no signals to everyone around her that her yes actually means something. Trait 3. Mysterious contentment. She seems genuinely happy alone, not pretending to be happy, not posting about how happy she is, actually authentically content with her own company. She has inside jokes with herself. She takes herself on dates. She creates a life so fulfilling that a partner would need to add value, not just fill space. Esther Perel's research shows that mystery is the fuel of desire. But this isn't manufactured mystery. This is the natural mystery of a woman who has a rich inner life that doesn't require external validation. Trait 4. Selective availability. She's present when she's with you, but she doesn't drop everything to be available. She has boundaries around her time, her energy, her space. She might go hours or even days without responding to messages, not because she's playing games, but because she has a life that absorbs her attention. This selective availability creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, one of the most powerful psychological principles of attraction. Trait 5. Mission-driven purpose. She's not just passing time until the right person comes along. She's building something, creating something, becoming something. Her life has direction and momentum that exists completely independent of romantic relationships. Arthur Aaron's studies consistently show that we're most attracted to people who are growing, evolving, expanding. Not people who are waiting for us to give their life meaning. Trait 6. Integrated strength and softness. She's not hard because she's been hurt. She's not soft because she's weak. She's consciously integrated both her fierce and tender aspects. She can be a warrior when protection is needed and a goddess when love is appropriate, but she never compromises one for the other. This integration creates what Sue Johnson calls secure attachment energy, the most attractive and stable foundation for any relationship. And now, trait 7, the ultimate magnetism. The woman who has remembered she is already whole. This is the trait that creates the deepest magnetic pull. She doesn't see herself as half of something waiting for completion. She doesn't believe in soulmates or the one or any narrative that suggests she's incomplete without romantic love. She has remembered the truth that every goddess throughout history has known. She is already whole. This wholeness radiates from her like a subtle perfume. It changes how she walks, how she speaks, how she occupies space. It changes what she'll accept and what she'll reject. It changes everything about how others perceive and respond to her. Because when someone truly knows they are complete, when they embody that truth rather than just thinking it, they become magnetic in ways that can't be faked, can't be taught, and can't be resisted. They become what Buss calls the ultimate mate value, someone who would enhance a life rather than complete it. And this is what makes her absolutely irresistible while being completely unnecessary. Here's what happened to her along the way. What looked like loneliness was actually solitude. What seemed like rejection was actually protection. What appeared to be giving up was really waking up. What felt like an ending was truly a beginning. She stopped apologizing for her standards and started honoring them as sacred filters. She stopped explaining her boundaries and started trusting them as inner wisdom. She stopped seeking external validation and started generating internal approval. The shift wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, like morning light gradually replacing darkness. One day she woke up and realized she wasn't waiting for anything anymore. She wasn't hoping for rescue. She wasn't seeking completion. She had become complete. And in that completion, something extraordinary happened. The universe began to reorganize itself around her new energy. Different people started appearing in her life. Different opportunities presented themselves. Different possibilities opened up. Not because she was trying to attract them, but because her frequency had changed. She was no longer broadcasting incomplete or needy or available to anyone. She was broadcasting whole and selective and abundant. David Buss's research proves that this kind of energy, this integrated, self-sufficient, choosy energy, it triggers what he calls mate-guarding behavior in others. People instinctively recognize that someone like this is rare, valuable, worth protecting and pursuing. But here's the beautiful paradox. The more whole she became, the less she needed anyone to choose her. The more complete she felt, the less completion she sought. The more magnetic she became, the more selective she grew. She had unlocked the ancient feminine secret that our grandmothers knew but our mothers forgot. A woman's power isn't in how much she can give, but in how carefully she chooses what to receive. She rescued herself, and that changed everything. The woman who needs nothing becomes everything, not because she's playing hard to get, but because she's genuinely hard to lose. Not because she's unavailable, but because she's discerning. Not because she doesn't want love, but because she refuses to settle for anything less than extraordinary. You can begin to notice this shift happening in yourself. As you read these words, something ancient might be stirring, a remembering, a recognition, a calling back to who you've always been underneath all the conditioning and compromising and trying to be who others wanted you to be. It's possible that you're already further along this path than you realize, that what you've been calling loneliness is actually sovereignty. That what you've been calling difficulty in relationships is actually discernment. That what you've been calling too picky is actually evolutionary intelligence. The magnetic woman doesn't need to try to be magnetic. She just needs to remember that she already is. Remember the question we started with? About those women who seem to possess an almost supernatural magnetism while being completely alone? Now you know the secret. It was never supernatural. It was always natural. It was always evolutionary. It was always you. The restlessness you've been feeling, the dissatisfaction with surface-level connections, the increasing unwillingness to settle or compromise your essence. This isn't a problem to be solved. This is an awakening to be honored. This is your inner goddess remembering her sovereignty. This is your evolutionary wisdom asserting itself. This is your true feminine power calling you home to yourself. You don't need to change anything about who you are. You don't need to become someone different. You just need to stop apologizing for who you've always been. The woman who is selective, the woman who has standards, the woman who knows her worth without needing external confirmation, the woman who can be alone without being lonely, the woman who chooses partnership but doesn't need rescue. This woman has always been you. She's just been buried under layers of conditioning that told you to be smaller, needier, more available, less discerning. But she's still there, and she's calling you back. As you integrate this understanding, notice what shifts in your daily life. Notice how you start moving through the world differently. Notice what you stop accepting and what you start expecting. Notice how your energy changes and how others respond to that change. This is your invitation to join the ranks of women who have remembered their magnetic nature, not through strategies or techniques, but through the simple act of returning to wholeness. The ancient feminine wisdom lives in you. The magnetic goddess energy flows through you. The evolutionary intelligence guides you. You are already everything you've been looking for. If something in this message resonated with a truth you had forgotten, share in the comments which trait spoke to you most deeply. Sometimes the greatest healing comes from discovering we're not alone in this remembering. And if you know a woman who needs to hear this, who's been apologizing for her standards or settling for less than extraordinary, share this with her, because the world needs more women who remember their magnetic nature